Hey there, it's Tom Ryan, founder and CEO of ICR. Before we get into the next episode, I wanted to ask that you subscribe to the show. It'll help us get even more unique and interesting guests on the podcast and in turn continue to educate management teams and the growing ecosystem that creates value for fast-growing private and public companies. And while you're at it, head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star rating. Very much appreciated.
It's a growing consumer base. It's growing faster than any segment in the country, but the customer is so much nuanced, very dynamic, very different from market to market. And I was just intrigued with the unique culture, the unique products, and the unique go-to-market strategy.
To excel in a specialized industry, you have to adopt an equally specialized business mindset.
We do a tremendous amount of research. We have a tremendous amount of flexibility when it comes to how we, again, tailor to that customer depending on where they came from in the world.
Being a public company can be hard. Small missteps can have outsized consequences. I'm Tom Ryan, founder and CEO of ICR, and over the last 25 years, we've helped thousands of companies understand and navigate the stock market and the media. We'll demystify these and other increasingly complex stakeholder groups so you can focus on what you do best, building your company and unlocking your true potential. This is Welcome to the Arena from ICR. For industry dominators, success rarely hinges on a one-size-fits-all approach. Instead, they master their market by focusing on specific demographics and creating tailored strategies unique to needs and preferences. Today's guest has used this method to craft customized solutions in his unique market. We're sitting down with Doug Sanders, Heritage Grocers Group Chairman and Chief Executive Officer. Doug's extensive career in the grocery industry spans 38 years across multiple and wide-ranging sectors, including supermarket retail, wholesale food distribution, retail technology solutions, natural and organic foods, in addition to the Hispanic and ethnic-focused specialty formats. Over the last 20 years, Doug has held the role of chairman and CEO for multiple private equity-owned grocery companies, including Sprouts Farmers Market, Cardenas Markets, and Heritage Grocers Group. In 2011, he led the sale of Sprouts Farmers Market to Apollo Global Management, followed by 2 successful acquisitions and an initial public offering in 2013. In 2022, Doug spearheaded the sale of Cardenas Market from KKR to Apollo, joining Cardenas Markets and Tony's Fresh Market under the parent company, Heritage Grocers Group. Let's enter the arena with Doug Sanders.
Heritage is the assemblage of today 3 different acquisitions. So we have Cardenas Markets, which is in Southern California, Nevada, and Arizona. And we have Tony's Fresh Market, which is in the greater Chicago area, as well as their latest acquisition, less than a year ago now, of El Rancho, who has stores in Dallas, Houston, Odessa, and 1 store in Kansas. So 115 total in 6 states and about 16,000 employees.
I mean, you're doing this at scale, right? I mean, this is a big business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's, one of the unique things about Heritage is in the Hispanic grocery business or the Hispanic sector is very fragmented. Not a lot of big companies. Your average Hispanic chain is, call it somewhere 10, 12, 15 stores, right? Even smaller. Heritage is very unique, one of the largest in the country. And one of the very few Hispanic operations that operate in multiple states. That in itself lends itself to the challenges and the opportunities. When you think about the Hispanic sector, extremely fragmented, as I mentioned, no really large-scale player of scale. And that's what we view as our opportunity here is creating the first Hispanic grocer of scale with the infrastructure and the capital behind it with Apollo to really grow and scale and become the leading player in the space.
Yeah. Well, listen, you've been doing this a long time in different areas of the industry. How did that opportunity come to you, and what did you see in this business that said, hey, you know what? You probably had a lot of options in your career. This is for me.
After I left Sprouts in 2017, took a little bit of time off, spent some time with a family member, but was really looking forward to finding that next opportunity, as you mentioned. So when KKR reached out and talked to me about a board opportunity with Cardenas, I kind of leaped at the opportunity because I'm looking at that sector. I've been in the grocery business, going on 40 years. I think I'll have 40 years starting next year. And I've worked in a lot of different sectors, but the kind of the ethnic, especially Hispanic sector was one that I didn't really have a whole lot of experience in. But as I spent more time looking at the opportunity and spending time out in the stores to really understand their operation, I was really intrigued with the uniqueness of the customer, the uniqueness of the operation. And it's just something that you don't see. It's a growing consumer base. Obviously, it's growing faster than any segment in the country. But the customer is so much nuanced, very dynamic, very different from market to market. And I was just intrigued with the unique culture, the unique products, and the unique go-to-market strategy from the Hispanic sector.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk a little bit more about that. Talk about the Hispanic demographic in the United States. Obviously, you're not only betting on that demographic, it's really a bet on America. But how is that relative to the overall population? And obviously, your stores are located where that population surge is. Maybe tell us a little bit more about the demographics as you see it.
Like I said earlier, it is the fastest growing demographic in the country and is projected to be outpace every other segment of the country probably for the next 30 years. What we're seeing, and again, this kind of varies by geography, but we're definitely seeing the growth, but we're seeing the growth in generational growth, if you will. So, we have stores that are in heavy first generation Hispanic areas, but then we have stores that are in heavy second, third, and even getting into fourth generation, which for us creates the opportunity, but also creates the challenge because as they move through the generational journey, right, their shopping patterns change, their needs change, the way they shop, the things they shop for, the things they ask for, everything changes as they move through that generational journey. But they also become a little bit better educated. They have a little bit higher income, right? So, you see that happen kind of over time. And that's a great opportunity for us. But also it's a challenge as well because, every one of our stores is a little bit unique. I always laugh. It's like we have 115 stores, but they're almost 115 unique stores because what we have to do as an organization is we always preach that, we have to meet the customer where they are.
Yeah.
And so in places where we have a heavy first and second generation consumer, we have to tailor our assortment to them, right? Very focused on that first generation customer, as opposed to a location who has a nice mix of second, third, maybe even fourth generation. We have broader assortment, more mainstream products and mainstream brands that we bring in, things that wouldn't appeal to a first generation consumer. So that's one. The other dynamic is where did they come from in the world, right?
Hispanic is kind of a blanket term, right? I mean, totally.
And to be quite honest with you, after doing this for, like I said, almost 40 years, I was guilty of that too, right? When I got here thinking that you could paint the Hispanic consumer with a broad brush and one size fits all and everything same, that could not be further from the truth, right? Every store we have has its own characteristics and it's all driven by that local population in those two dynamics that I talked about. What generation are they in? And where did they come from in the world? Did they come from Mexico? Did they come from Central America? In fact, we have stores with heavy Cuban populations that have a completely different product assortment in some areas. And again, this is probably why a lot of them don't exist, right? Is because it is very difficult to scale this thing because when you see one of these Hispanic chains, they're usually in one geographic area because that's that customer that they appeal to, right? And so we do a tremendous amount of research. We have a tremendous amount of flexibility when it comes to how we flex products assortments and how we, again, tailor to that customer depending on where they came from in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that authenticity is a word that you all use a lot. It's incredibly important for the customer. How do you balance that authenticity with being able to do all this market research? How are you authentic to all of those customers?
Again, it kind of goes back to our philosophy is kind of meeting the customer where they are. Our customer has a number of challenges, and how do we appeal to those challenges, right? It kind of likens back to you can't paint everything with a broad brush, right? So we have to look at every store kind of on a kind of standalone basis, understand the community that's around it, and then work with the local store teams because a lot of it is just feedback from the customer. You can typically go into one of our stores and the store manager can almost tell you where their customers came from because understand that we hire from within the community. So the people within the community are the people who work in our stores, right? And food is a big part of our consumer's life, right? The family meal, what they serve, how they serve, the ingredients that they buy, the things that we offer. It's a big part of the culture. It's in the feel of the store. It's do I feel safe shopping in that store? Do I feel comfortable shopping in that store? Do the people in that store speak the same language that I speak? Because to me, authenticity is a broad brush, but it goes into pretty much everything that we do.
Yeah. Talk about the design of the stores. I would imagine across different geographies, maybe that's different. If I went into a store, are there commonalities across the design? How are things kind of tweaked or changed depending on kind of the geography or the customer base?
I mean, even though Cardenas and El Rancho are both Hispanic, pure play Hispanic retailers, the look and feel of the store is different, right? They were two different companies, two different banners, two different design philosophies. However, they are designed to give that customer the kind of the open air market feel from a market in Mexico or Central America or wherever they may be from. And then from a department perspective, you obviously have departments that you're not going to find in a traditional grocery store. We have a full tortilleria production operation in our stores. We have full-blown cocina or kitchen operation in our stores that's creating very authentic meals with authentic recipes and ingredients, as well as in our bakery. We probably make the little bolillo, which is the authentic bread. I think we sell about 30 million of those a year. I mean, it's insane how many of those we sell in a week. But I think at the end of the day, as you walk through our stores, it's the sights, it's the sounds, it's the smell, it's the music, it's the decor, it's the bright, vibrant colors in the store. So there's a lot of things when you think about it, what's inside of our stores, whether it's the products we sell or the music or what have you. It definitely feels like an authentic Hispanic grocery store.
You have kind of these different banners and different geographies, and things are customized to a degree to different customer audiences. How do you create a company culture that's kind of uniform across all of that stuff?
It's not easy to do. However, once you start to embrace the culture itself, then now you're starting to really understand who that customer is, because culture is such a big piece. The authenticity, the culture, the traditions. Once you really start getting your hands around those, it's not as different as you think it is, but there are those nuances from culture to culture. But from a holidays perspective, I mean, that was one of the things that probably when I started with Cardenas that I was a little taken back with, just how many holidays we celebrate throughout the year. Really? Our holiday season actually starts the early part of November with Day of the Dead and runs all the way through January 6th with Three Kings Day. And there are probably a dozen different holidays from start to finish. So there's a lot of things to know. Yeah. So you have to know what drink, what meal, what ingredient, what cake, what everything that goes, because every one of these holidays has a certain meal component that's associated with it. It's a very big part of the Hispanic culture, right? Yep. So delivering great quality products to our customers so that they're proud of what they're feeding their families is a big piece, especially when we get into those holidays.
Yeah, that is amazing. There's obviously these huge national chains. How do they try and compete with you, or how do you handle competition if they try and zero in on a certain market or holiday or whatever? Like, how does that dynamic work?
I think understanding the customer is the biggest natural barrier to entry with what we do. I mean, I think, looking back over the years, the decades that I've been in the industry, there have been a number of traditional grocers have tried to crack the code on the Hispanic consumer, but it never really seems to work out because understanding the customer is the most important thing, right? And I think the barrier to entry, to your point, is really taking the time and having the flexibility to understand you can't use a broad brush with every one of our customers. That you really have to meet them where they are. You have to understand the challenges that they have. You need to understand the culture and the traditions that they have, but then also be able to tailor your offering and your services to meet that customer's needs. And like I said, 80% of it may be the same, but that last 20% is really what engages with the consumer and connects with them and builds that loyalty that we enjoy.
With Heritage Grocers' keen focus on demographics, it's clear that culture and authenticity are crucial to their audience. Given Heritage's growth through acquisitions, their customers might worry about preserving these values, so I'm curious how Doug approaches this concern and what he considers a successful acquisition.
I think, speaking strictly for Heritage, what's important to us is, again, taking the same approach whether we're acquiring a company or whether we're just looking to do ground-up stores, is really doing our research, understanding the consumer, not necessarily just coming in and saying, oh, well, this market is 40% Hispanic. You got to peel that onion back and saying, okay, what generation is that Hispanic consumer in? Where is the local community from? Because the Hispanic consumer is very brand loyal, right? So if we're going into a new market and it's not a market where we've operated in. We have to do a lot of homework around who is that consumer, where are they from, what generation are they in, because the last thing you want to do is go in and not understand what you're buying. Because again, when you think about this, right, we're not buying a traditional grocery store where everybody's selling Coke and Tide, and we're buying a Hispanic company who is embedded in that community.
Yeah.
Who's had years of serving that community. It has very community ties. These are family-run organizations, right?
Yeah.
And so you really have to be careful of what you tread on, what you can add. You can change all the back-end processes. We can change accounting systems, we can change ordering systems, we can do all those different things, but you have to be super careful about what you tweak inside the store. But the nice part about it is as we put brands together, we can take what's working really, really well in one and try it in the other. For example, we've shared a lot of back and forth from a product assortment perspective between Cardenas and El Rancho. Some of it's worked, some of it hasn't worked, but that just shows you the uniqueness of the consumer, right? And we may even be selling the exact same product here, but it has a completely different recipe because the flavor profile is completely different here from the customer in California. So, like I said, there's a lot of work and a lot of diligence that goes into looking at an acquisition because we truly need to understand what makes them special, what are we buying, and making sure that we don't mess it up after we buy it.
100%. And and at scale, you're sitting in the middle of all this data, which allows you to test different things, I assume. Just more broadly, how does Heritage use technology to make the customer experience better, to make your operations better?
From a technology perspective, we've invested heavily in technology over the last 4 years. Some of it is to create more scale. Obviously, we knew we were going to be growing quickly, so we had to get more scalable systems. Some of it is to make the operations just easier at store level, right? How can we streamline? How can we automate? Where can we simplify to make it easier for a cashier or for a store manager or for a stocker? Like putting in systems like, demand forecasting and automated replenishment. We put those technologies in so that we improve our supply chain. From a consumer perspective, we have introduced a new loyalty program over the last year. Again, another opportunity for us to learn more about our customer. So we pull that data in. We're pulling data from the stores. We create probably a terabyte of data a day, pulling information back from the stores and what we sell. And again, this is where, from within our data lake, we can use the technology that we have to find those nuances and understand those nuances. What's different about this store compared to that store? And so I think at the end of the day, with the data that we've been able to amass over the last 4 years, with the technology that we put on top of it, it should really mine into that data. When I talked about meeting our customer where they are, it's helping us dig deeper and really understand what that consumer is, but finding the commonalities between our stores from a store profile perspective and saying, if it's working here, and they have a very, very similar demographic, it should be working over here as well. So let's try that. We can just, again, continuing to tailor our assortments to meet that customer's needs.
I mean, that data itself seems like such a massive competitive advantage. Like no one else has it, right? So talk about an off-balance sheet, like amazing asset for the business. That's going to be huge. You've talked about loyalty to the customer, meeting the customers where they are. Can you share a memorable story that kind of highlights the impact of what you all do every day, like in the local community?
The impact that we've had as an organization, again, food is a very big piece of the culture, right? The value that we've been bringing to the local communities isn't necessarily just, providing the products that they need and trying to do it in a way where they can afford to feed their families, but then also how do we step outside and to support the community as a whole, through giving back. Each one of our banners has its own foundation. We do a lot of giving back to the community. One of the most impactful things for me, and we've had a couple of instances, opportunities for me to attend some of these events, where someone who's been participating in our scholarship program gets up and talks about how much that has helped them. And many, many, many times, these are the very first person in their family to go to college. They may have been the first person in their family to graduate from high school. So, when you think about, the generational structure, we have a lot of first generation customer, who moved here to create more opportunities for their children, right? And so to help them realize those opportunities through our scholarship program and hear how that's impacted their lives. And not just that, but hear how they want to give back to the local community now. So it creates the wheel, right?
Yeah. Hey, listen, we get up every day to work hard because we enjoy it. But when you have that as a benefit where you're doing amazing things in the community and like you changed a kid's life, like that's actually unbelievable. You kind of glossed over it, Doug, but Did you say each brand has a foundation?
Each brand has their own foundation, yes. And quite frankly, these foundations existed when we bought the organizations, right? Like the Cardenas family had a foundation and whatnot. So we had looked and said, okay, should we just create one heritage foundation? But we took a step back and said each one of them has a unique approach to their own local community. It's really tailored for that local community. What do they need? How are they meeting that needs? How do they engage with the local community? So for us, it made more sense to keep them on a standalone basis and say, El Rancho's foundation, this is what they focus on. Each one has its own strategy. Each one has its own board. Each one has its own budget, its own fundraising activities, whatnot. But, I would say when you look at our customer base, I think each one of them does a great job, understanding what the needs are and giving back to the community in the best way possible.
Yeah, it's really cool. Given all of your experience in the industry, when you look out the next 10 years, what kind of excites you most about the future for Heritage and just the grocery space in general? Where do you think it's all going?
Well, I think, obviously we see a tremendous opportunity with Heritage, with the Hispanic consumer. As this consumer base continues to grow and mature, and as we continue to see more growth in second generation, third generation, and like I said earlier, generationally, their shopping patterns change, and generationally, their buying power increases. So as those second and third generation populations continue to grow, you're going to see that buying power because, again, they're a little bit better educated, a little bit higher income, and as they go through the journey, you expect to see the shopping patterns, but you also, how do we continue to capture more of that customer as they go through the generational journey, right? Because they're going to be looking for things that we don't carry unless we start bringing, that they're going to find at a traditional grocery store, right? So that's a project that's been going on. It's ongoing. It's probably never going to change. Never going to be finished, right? It's always going to go on. But
you have their trust, right? I mean,
right.
That's like a privilege to have that, right?
And we have other services. We have subtenants in our stores that have services, whether it's cell phones, insurance, banking, money transfers, things like that. We have all those services in our stores as well. So it's not necessarily just coming in to buy groceries. I can come in and cash a check, pay my bills, wire money to my family in Mexico. I mean, there's a lot of different services that we provide, keeping in mind that some of our consumers are not, they don't have checking accounts, they don't have bank accounts. So there's a lot of services that we provide just outside of selling food.
Yep. Really cool. My last question, Doug, is how do you think about the runway for the business? You obviously are doing this at scale right now, but how do you think about the next 5 years in terms of your runway for growth or penetration?
That's why we do what we do, right? And it's to create more value within the organization. I'm excited about the growth opportunity. My prior company, we grew tremendously. Growth was one of the engines that we had. And I can definitely see the opportunity here. The two things that we have to make sure that we stay close to is really understanding the consumer. And like I said earlier, with that mountain of data that we're amassing every single day is helping us really dig deeper into that consumer. With that information, we're going to be able to use that through real estate site selection and more acquisitions, because I think that's, in my opinion, that's the fuel of where we're going. Is there's a number of these small family-run Hispanic retailers throughout the country, right, that are all doing a great job, that are serving that local customer. We're going to continue to do acquisition. We're going to continue to do organic store growth. Some years may be heavier on one, some years may be heavier on other. But I think that's always going to be part of our strategy, because taking a very, very fragmented segment of the grocery business and pulling it together, but understanding that the most important thing that we can do is never lose sight of that consumer, because the consumer is where their loyalty to a brand and their loyalty to a store is all built because they understand them and they give them a familiar, safe place to shop, and that really meets their needs. That's the piece that we have to be focused on, because this is not a one-size-fits-all market.
Heritage has carved out a niche in the Hispanic grocery industry by prioritizing customers' culture and an authentic connection. They know that for their demographic, success lies in the details. By taking a meticulous approach, they're instilling trust, loyalty, and building long-term success within their customer base. At Welcome to the Arena from ICR, we're working really hard to bring you exciting guests and great content. If you found this episode insightful, please subscribe to the show on your podcast app and leave us a 5-star rating. The more the show grows, the more interesting voices we can have on the podcast, and in turn, that should demystify a lot of the stakeholders around public companies and soon-to-be public companies. Thank you so much for listening. I'd like to thank our guest today, Doug Sanders, for joining me on the podcast. Heritage has firmly established itself in the market, and they're maintaining a significant competitive advantage through all the detailed data they've collected along the way. This is Tom Ryan. We'll see you next time back in the arena.
References to specific stocks are not intended to be recommendations for specific trading behavior. Comments presented on this podcast are intended for informational and educational purposes only, and do not represent opinions or recommendations on whether to buy, sell, or hold shares of a particular stock. All investors are advised to conduct their own independent research into individual stocks before making a trading decision. In addition, investors are advised that past stock performance is no guarantee of future price performance.